Every year, families and doctors are faced with unimaginable decisions. Imagine a mother whose pregnancy now threatens her life. Doctors warn that continuing the pregnancy may mean losing both mother and child. At the same time, Catholic teaching upholds the sanctity of life from conception, affirming that every human life is created in the image of God and possesses inherent dignity. In moments like these, medicine, morality, and faith collide. Should every effort be made to preserve both lives, even at immense risk? Can saving one life ever justify the loss of another? And when tragedy seems unavoidable, what is the ethical path forward? For the Catholic Church, these questions are not simply political. They are deeply moral, rooted in centuries of Christian teaching. Catholic ethics emphasizes both the sacredness of life and the responsibility to act with moral integrity in the face of suffering. Yet, modern society often approaches these crises differently, prioritizing bodily autonomy, medical choice, and public health. This tension has created one of the most difficult ethical debates of our time. When a mother's life, an unborn child's life, and deeply held moral beliefs all hang in the balance, what does Christian ethics demand? To answer this question, we must first understand the Catholic Church's moral framework. To understand how Christian ethics approaches abortion in cases of serious medical risk, we must first examine the Catholic Church's moral foundation, a doctrine shaped by centuries of theology, philosophy, and belief in the sacred dignity of every human life.
At the heart of Catholic teaching is the principle of sanctity of life, the belief that human life begins at conception and that every person, regardless of stage of development, possesses inherent dignity because they are created in the image of God. As the Catechism states, since the first century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed and remains unchangeable. This belief is not a recent political stance. From the earliest Christian communities, including the Diet and church councils, abortion was consistently condemned. Even as scientific understanding evolved, the Church maintained that all human life, from its earliest beginnings, deserved moral protection.
However, Catholic ethics does not simply ignore maternal suffering. Serious medical emergencies can create tragic circumstances in which preserving both lives may not be possible.
The Catholic moral theology always wants to preserve the mother's life as much and the fetus's life as much as possible. So you treat the mother for her health, and you don't do anything that directly endangers the fetus unless it is so urgent.
This distinction is essential. In Catholic moral theology, the moral question is not simply whether fetal death occurs, but whether the death is directly intended. This is where the principle of double effect becomes central. Double effect teaches that an action may be morally permissible if the primary intention is to treat a serious pathology, such as removing cancerous uterus or addressing life-threatening condition, even if the unintended secondary consequence is the death of a fetus.
So the principle of double effect comes from the idea that an act takes its moral character from its purpose or goal. And the goal, it has to be something that's not just existing in somebody's mind, but can also be observed by anybody else and understood. If the goal, for instance, there's an aggressive uterine cancer and there is an embryo or a fetus implanted in the uterus, and the goal is to save the woman's life by removing the cancer. And when you remove the uterus, it has a fetus or an embryo in it. That is a side effect of the action, which is removing the uterus to save the woman's life.
In other words, Catholic ethics distinguishes between directly intending abortion and treating a life-threatening medical condition, even when fetal death may indirectly result. The goal must never be to destroy a life, but to preserve life whenever morally possible. This moral framework reflects the Church's broader belief that every human life, born or unborn, possesses dignity, and that ethical decisions must uphold both truth and compassion even in the most painful circumstances. But while Catholic doctrine offers a clear moral framework, modern medicine and society often raise even more difficult questions.
While Catholic doctrine provides moral principles, real-life pregnancies can present devastating medical realities that are far more complex than theory alone. Some pregnancies involve life-threatening emergencies such as ectopic pregnancy, where implantation outside the uterus can become fatal, pulmonary hypertension, where pregnancy can dangerously strain the mother's heart and lungs, or severe fetal abnormalities, where prenatal diagnoses reveal profound or life-limiting conditions before.
According to the World Health Organization, abortion is also a global public health issue. Around 73 million induced abortions occur worldwide each year, and unsafe abortion remains a preventable cause of maternal death and injury. WHO data shows that barrier to timely medical care can increase maternal suffering, particularly in medical emergencies where delayed treatment may place women's life at even greater risk.
Medical journals such as The Lancet emphasize that in certain emergencies, physicians may face urgent situations where pregnancy itself poses serious danger to the mother. These cases challenge doctors to balance preserving life with preventing catastrophic loss.
Roman Catholicism would want to do anything it can to the fetus in utero to improve its chances of health at birth.
In these cases, Catholic teaching generally continues to reject direct abortion, even when severe fetal abnormalities are present. However, it also emphasizes care, compassion, and moral discernment, calling families and physicians to respond with dignity, love, and ethical seriousness. This raises one of the most emotionally painful ethical tensions, whether compassion is defined by preserving life at all costs or by minimizing suffering when prognosis is devastating. For many families, these are not abstract political debates. They are deeply personal decisions shaped by fear, faith, grief, and love. These realities reveal why Christian ethics in serious medical cases cannot be reduced to slogans alone. Instead, they demand moral reflection that considers medical urgency, human dignity, suffering, and the sacred value of life. But while medicine presents urgent realities, society often interprets these crises through a very different lens.
While Catholic ethics emphasize the sanctity of life and moral absolutes, modern society often approaches abortion through a different framework, one centered on autonomy, maternal rights, and medical freedom. Organizations such as the World Health Organization and the Gutterman Institute frame abortion not only as a moral issue, but also as a public health, legal, and human rights concern. The World Health Organization highlights how access to safe abortion care can impact maternal health outcomes, while Gutterman data illustrates how abortion laws differ widely across states and nations, reflecting major social disagreements over who should make these decisions and under what circumstances. For many in modern society, the central ethical question is not only the life of the fetus, but also whether pregnant individuals have the right to make the decision about their own body's health and future.
But beyond institutions and policy debates, how does our own generation understand these ethical questions?
Ethics in the Catholic Church teach that every person has inherent human dignity, regardless of any abnormalities or disabilities that person may experience. And because of this, I would say that no, direct abortion is not morally justifiable based on fetal conditions.
I personally think that conditions in where the mother's life is at risk could possibly warrant abortion, but I think this is based on a lot of things, such as the actual risk of the condition that she has and the chances of the doctor fixing it. And if those chances are super high risk, I think that abortion could be a permissible option in that case. I kind of have a different perspective with the fatal conditions for the actual baby. For fatal risk in the baby, I don't think that should warrant abortion, because when they're born into this world, they still have a right to live.
Severe fetal conditions are heartbreaking, but they do not change my overall view. I believe every human life has value, regardless of disability or prognosis. In those situations, I think families should be given as much emotional and medical support rather than ending the pregnancy. However, I do understand why these cases are emotionally difficult for many people.
I think that abortion can be morally permissible if the mother's life is at risk. Certain pregnancies do threaten the mother's health. I think that in that case, the patient has the right to make medical decisions that are going to prioritize the mother's life. Obviously, it's a super complicated situation, but I think that it is moral to make the decisions that are going to help the living person. Severe fatal conditions, they do change my view, at least to some extent. I think if the condition is going to cause a lot of suffering and maybe the baby is going to die after it's being born, then I think that there is reason and cause for an abortion.
These responses reveal the complexity of our cultural movement. Even among young people, perspectives differ widely, shaped by faith, ethics, medicine, law, and personal values. For some, protecting unborn life remains the highest moral priority. For others, compassion means prioritizing maternal autonomy, reducing suffering, or preserving freedom of choice. This tension between Catholic moral teaching and societal emphasis on autonomy highlights one of the deepest ethical divides of our time: who defines compassion, who holds moral authority, and how law should respond when life itself hangs in the balance. Yet, even within Catholic thought itself, these questions continue to spark dialogue, reflection, and ethical debate. Although Catholic doctrine clearly opposes direct abortion, the reality of applying these teachings in modern medicine is often far more complex. While official doctrine remains firm, scholars and ethicists continue debating how best to apply timeless principles in modern medical crises.
Scholar Philip Kaufman's work on Catholic pluralism highlights how, although the Church maintains a consistent pro-life doctrine, many Catholic theologians have long debated how moral teaching should respond to tragic exceptions, maternal emergencies, and evolving social realities. This does not mean rejecting social teaching, rather it reflects ongoing dialogue about how moral truth, pastoral care, and human suffering intersect.
Tamisha Means was in a county in Michigan that really only had one hospital, and she went in great pain with bleeding because she had a miscarriage in progress, for which the usual treatment would be a D&C. But the hospital was a Catholic hospital. And so instead of treating her in that way or recommending where she could go to have one if she wanted, they simply sent her home. And she came back 2 or 3 times, developing an infection, etc. And they didn't really treat her until she began to deliver the fetus. So I think one of the most important questions is, what do we do when clearly the fetus is no longer viable, even if it has a heartbeat?
Cases such as Tamisha Means, a woman reportedly denied standard miscarriage care at a Catholic hospital because of religious directives, reveal the difficult tension that can emerge when doctrine, emergency medicine, and patient care collide. These cases force Catholic institutions to confront painful questions. How should moral law guide care when delay may worsen suffering? And how can hospitals remain faithful to doctrine while responding compassionately to urgent medical realities?
Part of the difference has to do with Catholic thinking attaching abortion to sexuality, and thinking of sexuality as a moral issue only between 2 people, and not thinking of it in its broader social and cultural and political context. Whereas modern society sees, and also when push comes to shove, sometimes Catholics will see the fetus as the primary patient, whereas contemporary culture sees the woman as the primary patient.
This dialogue reveals an essential truth. Within Catholic ethics, disagreement often does not center on whether life is sacred, but on how best to uphold sacred dignity among suffering, fear, and medical uncertainty. Ultimately, internal Catholic debate demonstrates that Christian ethics is not static legalism, but an ongoing struggle to apply enduring moral principles with wisdom, compassion, and justice. So, where do faith, medicine, and society go from here? When facing pregnancies marked by serious medical risk, profound suffering, or heartbreaking diagnosis, Christian ethics cannot simply end with condemnation or debate. A positive ethical response begins with better maternal health care, ensuring that women facing dangerous pregnancies have access to early diagnosis, life-saving intervention, specialized medical care, and ethical guidance before a crisis becomes catastrophe. Improved prenatal medicine, including earlier detection of treatment of serious maternal or fetal conditions, can help preserve life, reduce suffering, and expand morally responsible options. Hospitals, especially faith-based institutions, can also strengthen ethical hospital committees, bringing together physicians, theologians, ethicists, and families to carefully navigate these complex situations with both moral conviction and medical wisdom.
For families, the path forward must also include pastoral counseling, emotional support, and compassionate company. In moments of fear, grief, and uncertainty, people need more than rules. They need guidance, prayer, understanding, and communities willing to walk beside them. Whether families continue a pregnancy, face loss, or confront impossible choices, Christian ethics calls faith communities to respond with mercy rather than isolation.
Ultimately, moving forward requires respectful dialogue between medicine, theology, law, and lived human experience. It means protecting life while also acknowledging suffering. It means moral clarity without losing compassion. Christian ethics calls not only for moral conviction, but for compassion, accompaniment, and wisdom in the face of profound suffering. In a world of painful medical uncertainty, perhaps the deepest moral responsibility is not merely defending principles, but faithfully caring for the people living through them. Across faith, medicine, and society, these questions remain among the most difficult ethical challenges of our time. For families facing crisis, for physicians making urgent decisions, and for communities seeking moral truth, these issues are never simply political. They are profoundly human. They demand more than ideology. They require courage, discernment, compassion, and a commitment to protecting dignity even in life's most painful moments. In a world of medical uncertainty and moral division, perhaps the deepest ethical responsibility is not simply choosing sides, but learning how to preserve dignity, truth, and compassion when life's hardest decisions arise.